When a 43-year-old Florida man received a video call from his girlfriend's young children at 1:55 a.m., he immediately knew something was wrong. It was far too late on a school night for them to be awake. Groggy but alarmed, he picked it up only to be met with panicked voices and a chilling claim that didn't seem real. Determined to find out what was going on, he rushed to his girlfriend's home, but what he discovered inside would haunt him forever.
We woke up to the sheriff's knocking on the door, asking for information if we had anything on our security cameras, but we have no idea what happened over there. It's awful.
Hello, and welcome to another Crime Atlas upload. I'm your host, James. I hope everyone is safe and well. Just when I think I've seen it all, a case comes along that stops me in my tracks. This video is about one of those cases. It's a story of breathtaking horror, and the level of premeditation, emotional detachment, and manipulative behavior are traits often associated with a psychopath. But before we get into the gritty details of this haunting case, I just want you to know that I am grateful to have you as part of our community. We wouldn't be here without you. With that said, if it's in your heart to do so, you can really help us out by hitting that like button, dropping a comment, subscribing, or tapping the notification bell to stay in the loop. It means the world to us, and our old friend Al, last name Go Rhythm, likes it too. All right, enough talking. Let's go ahead and jump into the story. This story takes us to Cocoa, a small city in Brevard County, Florida, with a population of 19,041, according to the latest census. Situated on Florida's Space Coast, Cocoa is known for its historic charm and its close proximity to the Kennedy Space Center. Here, rocket launches frequently light up the night sky, and life unfolds at a slower, more relaxed pace. According to one local legend, the city's name traces back to an elderly African-American woman who lived along the banks of the Indian River. She was known for offering hot cocoa to sailors passing by. As the story goes, the sailors would call out, "Cocoa, cocoa," to signal they had arrived and wanted the warm beverage. This tale reflects the city's long-standing reputation as a welcoming and relatively peaceful place. Crime rates here have been slightly below the national average, largely overshadowed by the bustling tourism scene and the draw of nearby beaches. But in the early months of 2023, the city's peaceful reputation was shattered by a crime so abhorrent it left the entire community in disbelief. It was a mild 66 degrees at 1:55 a.m. on Wednesday, March 1st, 2023, in Rockledge, Florida. Kevin D. was sound asleep when the chime of his cell phone abruptly woke him. It was a FaceTime call from an unexpected number, his girlfriend Constance Terwilliger's 15-year-old daughter, Kiara. But when Kevin answered, it wasn't Kiara on the screen. Instead, her two young brothers, just 6 and 9 years old, appeared. They told him they had woken to the sound of crackling and screaming. Moments later, they discovered their family members were severely injured and not responding. Kevin immediately drove to Constance's home in Cocoa while keeping the boys on the line. When he arrived at the house, he entered through the front door and immediately observed 2 deceased adults on the floor. His initial action was to move the boys to his car away from the crime scene. They were later placed in the care of relatives. As he re-entered the house and prepared to call 911, one question consumed his thoughts. Who could have done this, and why?
My girlfriend's son just called me and said his parents were dead. I just got over to the house because I didn't know what was going on. The grandma, the mom, the dad, and the sister were all dead, and the boys were the only ones alive. There's blood all over the place.
Deputies from the Brevard County Sheriff's Office quickly arrived at the residence and made entry through the front door. One deputy entered the north bedroom and found an elderly female lying on a bed with an apparent gunshot wound to the face. She was identified as 63-year-old Glenda Mae Terwilliger, the family's matriarch. Born in September 1959 and originally from Winlock, Washington, she had most recently resided in Cocoa, Florida with her daughter, Constance, and her 3 grandchildren. As officers continued to clear the residence, they came across a deceased male and female lying directly next to each other on the living room floor. They were identified as Glenda's daughter, Constance Marie Terwilliger, age 35, and her ex-boyfriend, 36-year-old Michael Andrew Watson, the father of the 2 small boys. Both also appeared to have been shot in the head. Officers noted a large amount of blood underneath both individuals, as well as a shell casing and bloody footprints. Another deputy approached the south bedroom of the residence. Upon entering, he observed a deceased female lying on a bed, later identified as 15-year-old Kiara Terwilliger. There was a pool of blood beneath her head caused by a gunshot wound, just like the others. Kiara's death marked 3 generations of Terwilliger women whose lives came to a sudden and violent end that evening. No suspects were located within the residence, and police established a perimeter for the crime scene. Meanwhile, neighbors reacted to the stunning news with shock and profound sadness.
I feel for the kids that were in the home and had to witness this. I'm sure it's going to affect them for a really long time. That's what's sad.
As the crime scene unit began processing the scene, officers turned their attention to Kevin, who provided crucial information about the victims, including their names and relationships. When questioned about potential conflicts, threats, or incidents of domestic violence involving the victims, Kevin identified one individual, a man named Domenico Gigante.
.24 grit. Still got to do the handle part, but well, it's finished. Use the Osflow to finish up the last of the rust spots to pull the oxide out.
Kevin explained that Domenico, Kiara's biological father, lived at a different address. Kiara was the result of a brief 2-month relationship between Domenico and Constance. Kevin described Kiara's relationship with her father as troubled, noting that she harbored significant resentment toward him for being absent for most of her life. According to Kevin, Domenico had recently attempted to reconnect with his estranged daughter, but Kiara did not want a relationship with him and was confused by his sudden reappearance. Kevin added that he had last spoken to Constance the previous night at 8:30 p.m. During their conversation, Constance mentioned that Domenico had sent Kiara a text earlier that day saying, "F you." While Kevin wasn't aware of the full context of the exchange between Kiara and her father, he shared that Constance had been having ongoing issues with Domenico regarding Kiara. Constance had insisted that all communication between Domenico and Kiara occur over the phone, not in person. Later, someone close to Kiara alleged that Domenico had behaved inappropriately, even going so far as to ask her to send him photos of herself in a bathing suit. This information led police to consider Domenico Gigante a person of interest. The case was then transferred to the Homicide Unit, which was tasked with solving the quadruple murder. Their investigation focused on identifying who wanted the victims dead, uncovering the motive behind the killings, and reconstructing how the crime had unfolded.
It all happened at this home on Southwest Allen Shepherd Avenue in Canaveral Groves. Deputies say one of the kids managed to call someone who in turn called 911. When deputies made it, 4 people were dead.
At approximately 3:48 a.m., homicide detectives arrived and gathered initial information from the responding officers. After securing a search warrant, they entered the crime scene and noted damage to the front door frame and a boot impression near the door handle, clear signs of forced entry. They collected significant evidence, including shell casings, blood samples for DNA analysis, and photographs of the scene. Once the crime scene unit completed processing the residence, the focus shifted to Domenico. At this stage of the investigation, detectives were working to uncover every detail about Domenico Gigante, who he really was and how he might be connected to the horrific events of that night. To uncover any clues that might shed light on his past, I turned to my go-to research tool, TruthFinder. As you probably know, I use truthfinder.com all the time. The process is super easy. I entered Domenico's name and the city where he lived into TruthFinder's powerful public records search engine, and in seconds I had access to phone numbers, location history, traffic records, possible arrests, even criminal convictions. TruthFinder also flags registered sex offenders. Using TruthFinder, I learned Domenico was born in July 1986 and has had addresses in New Jersey and Florida. But the real eye-opener was his criminal history. Serious charges like aggravated assault, aggravated battery with a deadly weapon, domestic battery, and even animal cruelty. These aren't minor offenses, they're major red flags, widely seen as indicators of violent tendencies and a risk for escalating dangerous behavior. By the way, these unlimited public record searches, they're not just for content creators, they're available to anyone with a paid subscription. Search for sex offenders in your area, look up your next-door neighbor, or find out if that person you're chatting with online is who they say they are. Here's the best part. You can get 50% off your first month of unlimited confidential background reports right now when you purchase a subscription at truthfinder.com/TCA. It's an absolute steal for peace of mind, safety, and confidence in your decisions. Now, let's get back to our case. Throughout the early stages of the investigation, Domenico's name repeatedly surfaced as a person of interest. Detectives discovered that he lived on the 1000 block of Matador Drive in Rockledge, and a silver 1998 Dodge pickup truck was registered in his name. He worked part-time for the hometown news Brevard, delivering newspapers for the last 6 years. While canvassing the neighborhood around the crime scene, a detective noticed a surveillance camera at a nearby house and got permission from the resident to review the footage. The video captured a silver Dodge pickup truck arriving at the victim's residence at 1:19 a.m. The driver switched the headlights off as it drove onto the property. Just 2 minutes later, there was a loud bang. Officers believe this was the sound of the front door being forced open. Over the next 71 seconds, 9 gunshots rang out before the perpetrator returned to the silver Dodge pickup and fled the scene. With this information in hand, 2 homicide detectives headed to Domenico's residence to deliver a death notification. They arrived at 11:22 a.m. Their goal was to assess his emotional and behavioral reactions to the news of his daughter's brutal death. Additionally, they wanted to persuade him to accompany them to the police station voluntarily for further questioning.
Is your daughter's name Kiara?
Kiara? Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, we found her deceased today.
What? Is this a joke?
It's not a joke.
Sorry. What? I'm, huh?
It's not a joke.
Oh, what happened?
We're still actively trying to figure that out. At this point.
Was she at school? What happened?
Like I said, sir, unfortunately, we're still trying to figure it out.
Okay.
We wanted to notify the father.
I have the same questions you guys. Was she home? Was she at school? Did this happen at a bus stop? Is it because of her boyfriend?
Well, we would be hoping that you would be able to help us out with that as well. Would you mind coming down to the precinct and talking with us?
Not at this time. I need to process this. This is
Dominic, they need to talk to you. You need to put. He has Asperger's, so he has a little bit of difficulty processing.
That's understandable. We're trying to figure out what happened to your daughter, sir. And if you come down and talk to us, that will give us a little bit more insight.
Yeah, we're trying to piece together a lot of information.
You know, I got a table, the dogs are up, I could have a cigarette. I mean, like you said, I don't even know where to start with this. This doesn't even seem real. I'm sorry, excuse me.
It doesn't seem real.
You gotta go talk to them.
On behalf of the sheriff's office, we have to say
Jesus.
Full condolences.
Are you gonna go with me?
She should be at school.
Yeah, she's supposed to be at school right now. I know she had the strep throat,
Bruce,
but I mean...
you could come as well, it would be helpful if you could as well.
I really do need someone to come with me. I'm sorry, I have Asperger's. I'm autistic, and fuck.
Would you be willing to come over as much information as we could get? It would be helpful.
Yeah. Our office isn't very far from here. It's right down here on Gothic.
Okay, well, let me,
We gotta put the dog.
I gotta get some clothes on and, what do you want to do? Want us to come to
Are we still fucking awake?
to the,
Well,
to the Rockledge office or
you
what?
guys are upset, and we don't want you driving, so you could each ride with one of us. Because you just got some of the worst news you could ever get, and we don't want
I
you to get into that.
don't even know where to start. I don't even know how to process this.
All right, well, let me get some clothes on. What the fuck?
According to police records, officers were skeptical of Domenico's reaction to the devastating news. They noted, Gigante acted as if he was in disbelief at the time but did not get emotional. Shortly after, when Domenico and his roommate went back inside to retrieve their keys, the roommate confronted him, asking, "Did you do this?" Domenico responded, "Yes, I shot her 3 times. It's just you and me now. We have to stick together and we will get through this." After the roommates returned from the house, detectives drove them to the station in separate vehicles. One officer noted that during the ride, in a chilling display of emotional detachment, Domenico did not show any concern toward his daughter. Instead, he spoke about global warming and the environment. By contrast, the roommate was upset and emotional and shared critical news with the agent who drove him. He said the prior night, at around 11:30 p.m., Domenico was in a rage over Chiara not communicating and giving him details about her health. He said Domenico stated, "I guess I'm just going to have to go over there and kill them all." The roommate explained, "God help me, maybe I should have known, but it just seemed like another one of his fits." He added that Domenico is familiar with guns, and if he used a gun, it was probably the one owned by the roommate. He was also able to provide doorbell camera footage to his residence, which showed Domenico entering his silver Dodge pickup while holding a handgun 23 minutes before the shooting took place. The camera also captured Domenico returning home roughly 19 minutes after the last shot was fired. With the mounting evidence and the roommate's detailed account, detectives knew it was time to confront Domenico directly. His alleged confession, the chilling statements about his daughter, and the damning doorbell camera footage painted a disturbing picture that demanded answers. Now, it was up to the investigators to press Domenico during a formal interview and determine the full extent of his involvement in the horrific events of that night. Two detectives from the Brevard County Sheriff's Office advised Domenico of his Miranda rights. Based on a transcript, he waived those rights and agreed to speak with detectives. When asked when he last saw Chiara in person, Domenico said it was around 2 p.m. on Monday, 35 hours before the shootings. She had a doctor's appointment for strep throat, which kept her home from school. He stated he last spoke with her by phone the next day at 3 p.m., adding, "That's the only thing that bothers me," referring to the nature of their last conversation, where he tried to get her to answer questions about how she was feeling. When the detective asked if he had any communication with Chiara during the night, Domenico replied, "She called me at 1:30 a.m. while I was at home, on the toilet actually. It caught me off guard because Chiara doesn't usually call me, especially at that hour. It seemed odd. I thought maybe she had finally taken my advice and was reaching out to discuss a problem, maybe trying something new." The detective followed up, "And did you respond?" Domenico said, "Not right away. I missed the call, so I texted her back. I said, 'Hey, sorry I missed your call. Was on toilet. You're right, it's just a doctor appointment. I'm sorry. See you for sushi later.'" Domenico described himself as a hermit crab with no friends who doesn't leave the house at night unless it's for work. He insisted he followed his usual routine on Tuesday night, going to bed at 6 p.m., waking up at 1 a.m., exercising and preparing for work. He denied leaving his house, owning or accessing a firearm, and admitted that no one borrowed his silver Dodge pickup truck that night. After noting the inconsistencies in Domenico's statements, it was time for detectives to confront him. Domenico, you said you didn't go anywhere, but the doorbell camera at your house shows you leaving in your vehicle last night. Why did you lie about that? A startled Domenico replied, "Oh, I must have forgotten. I went to Jim Harper's house to smoke marijuana and have a fire." The detective responded, "Makes sense. Can you provide Jim Harper's contact information so we can confirm that?" I don't have it," said Domenico. The detective pressed further. "By the way, the footage, it also shows you carrying a handgun while getting into your vehicle. Care to explain that?" As silence filled the room, Domenico shifted in his seat. Then, without hesitation, he turned to the officers and said, "I'm done. I don't want to talk anymore." Shortly afterward, Brevard County Sheriff Wayne Ivey, a graduate of the FBI National Academy, held a press conference to update the public on the status of Domenico Gigante.
I'm also going to share with you that approximately 1 hour ago, our agents arrested Domenico Claude Gigante, age 36, of Rockledge, Florida. He was charged with 4 counts of premeditated first-degree murder on a warrant signed by Judge David Koenig that obviously has no bond. Folks, I'm going to tell you that this is an extremely violent individual with an extremely violent past dating back as far as 2005, who should have never been on our streets where he could take the lives of this entire family. In 2005, he was arrested for domestic violence and battery. In 2008, he was arrested for multiple counts of cruelty to animals. In 2012, aggravated battery with a deadly weapon and aggravated assault. And I have said this before, that if you are the capacity of a person that you can harm an animal, you will hurt a human being. And this individual is living proof of that statement. He actually killed a dog by slamming his head on the table and then breaking his neck and then stabbed another dog. That's the level of violence that this individual possesses. As I said, he should have never been on the street where he could harm this family or anyone else. Our team has developed him as a suspect through various leads and evidence, and I could not be more proud of our team for the job that they have done. Gigante is the biological father of Kiera, the victim who was age 15 and was formerly in a relationship with Constance, the mother. Currently, he is at our criminal investigative building and is being prepared for transport to the Brevard County Jail.
While waiting to be transported to jail, Domenico repeatedly asked officers if he could speak with his roommate one last time. The roommate, who happened to be at the station then, was advised and agreed to talk to him while on video. The first thing Domenico asked was, "Did you tell the police anything?" "I told the truth," said the roommate. "Why?" replied Domenico. "Because you did something horrible," said the roommate. In a jailhouse call to the roommate 5 days later, Domenico asked him to trade places with him and say that he committed the murders out of his love for him. He also mentioned his plans to plead insanity. Weeks later, Domenico was indicted by a grand jury on 4 counts of murder in the first degree and 1 count of armed burglary. The case was then sent to State Attorney Phil Archer's office for prosecution, who quickly announced plans to seek the maximum punishment.
A grand jury indicted Domenico Gigante yesterday on 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of armed burglary. He's accused of killing 4 people March 1st in Canaveral Groves, including a 15-year-old. The Brevard State Attorney's Office says the indictments qualify Gigante for the death penalty. Prosecutors are currently reviewing all available evidence to support the death penalty for each of the victims. Gigante is being held on no bond.
In Florida, first-degree murder is a capital felony punishable by life without parole or the death penalty. Domenico Gigante's case is still moving through the legal system, with a docket sounding set for March 6, 2025. At this hearing, prosecutors and the defense will update the judge on the case's progress and determine if it's ready for trial or requires more time. While no evidence or testimony will be presented, the hearing will shape the next steps in the case. The path to justice can be a long and grueling process. As the legal process continues, the goal remains the same: uncovering the truth, holding those responsible accountable, and offering some sense of closure to those impacted by this tragedy. What are your thoughts on this case? Do you think the roommate should have taken Domenico's comments more seriously? Feel free to share your thoughts below.